Peace and blessings to everyone that is within the reach of my voice, the site of this broadcast. As we kick off our interview with the Green Party presidential candidate, Dr. Jill Stein. Apologies for the delay, dealing with a little bit of a technical glitch, but it appears that has been straightened out and we are about ready to go. Just waiting for Dr. Stein to jump in. Please don't hesitate to start typing questions into the chat as we get through. I have quite a few questions that I want to pose in the first instance, but I'm going to be happy to make this a dialogue and as much of a public dialogue as possible. There's Dr. Stein, and I will invite Dr. Stein in. And I added you as a moderator, Dr. Stein. If you could just request to join the live. Yeah, absolutely. Super excited to see the live interview. And if, Dr. Stein, if you're just able to send a request. Yeah, she joined. She needs to send a request to hop on the live. I actually sent a request your way also, but I don't know if you've received it. I already see a couple of questions. There we go. Stein here in just a moment.
Hi.
How you doing, Dr. Stein? Glad we could make this work.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Really good to see you, Professor.
It's an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to be here. I'm going to date myself, and I heard that we were having some difficulties, getting the tech straightened out. Getting a couple people of our generation to figure out how to use this tech is a minor miracle of its own. So grateful that we've been able to make this happen.
Thanks for your patience, and thanks to all of your audience for hanging in there with us, and me in particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it's all good. So first of all, just really wonderful to get this chance to talk. I'm gonna just say a few words to kind of set the conversation up, and then I've got questions for you. I know people are already in the chat with questions for you. I heard you did a 4-hour TikTok Q&A session. Listen, I am not planning to drag you out here for 4 hours. But I do hope that we get some time to respond to some of the people's questions as well.
Great.
So
Great.
I'll say a quick word. As a historian of Africa, as a historian of resistance, anti-imperialism, I've been following your work. I always follow, progressive social movements and political movements. But really, what caught my attention in the last few days was you quoting Malcolm. People that follow my feed will know that Malcolm was my introduction to the Black radical tradition. He was the person that brought me to Islam,
Yeah.
my personal faith. And so I wanted to just hear you expand on the two Malcolmisms that I heard from you in the past couple weeks. One, after the apparent shooting of presidential candidate Donald Trump, you alluded, without mentioning Malcolm's name, to something that I had said that very day in a post, right? That this is imperialism's chickens coming home to roost, that you do not put this much violence out into the world and then expect that violence will not come back to touch you. And of course, Malcolm famously said this. after the Kennedy assassination and was reprimanded by the Nation of Islam. It was part of the beginning of his separation from that organization. So the question first was about that, this atmosphere of violence, the imperialism that we send abroad, and finding it come back home. The second one will be an easier transition into kind of the Green Party's political positions. Malcolm famously compared liberals to foxes. They bare their teeth. You think they're smiling, but they are getting ready to eat. Wolves, they show their teeth, and we know that they're there to consume us. They differ only in the modality of the hunt. And I think that this is a beautiful metaphor for the duopoly, and I heard you refer to it in another interview. So please go in on either of these Malcolm metaphors to get us kicked off.
Yeah, I mean, I think Malcolm is, just a very powerful vision, very powerful message across the board. And uh, when I mentioned the chickens coming home to roost, I wasn't aware that he had said that.
Really?
After I didn't
Okay.
know that after the Kennedy assassination. So, I like feel so honored to be kind of in the same vision space with him, without even knowing it. But, I feel that about so much of his wisdom and his struggle and his fight was such you know, a really powerful message and a wonderful companion to Martin Luther King, who also had wonderful things to say. But Malcolm, had such a sense of struggle
Mm,
and the fight, and knowing what was up against him and just calling it out all the time,
yeah.
and the dialectic between them is really interesting and very uplifting and informative, and I adore and appreciate them both. Malcolm was a discovery for me later on. I had to sort of get political to find him,
Yeah.
whereas MLK is out there for everyone all the time,
A,
distorted, of course.
a particular version of
Yes,
MLK. Yeah.
yes, but they're both such treasures and such repositories of wisdom. So it was really great to hear that he had said the same thing about JFK, uh, and that just speaks so much truth. And on the foxes and the wolves,
And the wolves.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think we can't say enough. That too that's a it's not your entry level kind of political awareness. You have to be really politically aware to understand what that struggle is with the foxes, and why the foxes are not your friend, and why we all have to stand up, and embrace that struggle with the foxes, and not get misled by them and manipulated by them and seduced by them, because it is the white liberal, that is a fox and that is forever sheepdogging us, sheepdogging us back into where the fox can kind of consume the chickens. I'm mixing a
Yeah.
lot of metaphors here, but it's the foxes guarding the chicken coop, and we're the chickens, and
Yeah.
we have to be very wary of the foxes. They're out all over the place, and to me this speaks so much to what's going on, to our political moment right now, where we are being sheepdogged once again, or fox dogged, or whatever, but the foxes are out there
We're
for
being
us right
hunted.
now.
We're being hunted without any question.
Totally.
So let's use that then to a transition to kind of a read for the current state of play. I made a post probably. Yeah, I think it was right after Biden stepped down, and I said whether you vote red or whether you vote blue, militarized fascism wins. Right? That
Yeah.
you're essentially looking at a rivalry between two different factions of the 1%, who have overlapping patronage networks. So they're sometimes in competition, but they're always working against us. So that's a different way of saying what Malcolm said about the foxes and the wolves. Give us the state of play of the duopoly today on Monday, August 12th, 2024.
They're coming for us, as they always are. And, we, the people, are in an uprising, that's been going on for a long time, but it's, you know, to quote Malcolm again, the chickens come home to roost
Yep.
here, from empire. empire is both a war abroad and it's a war at home. It's a war on working people. It's a war on communities of color. It's a war on our democracy. And all of these are going on. And, the foxes are out there trying to distract us, trying to persuade us that they're our friend. And we see Kamala Harris, who was basically anointed without a single vote. And, they're telling us, in no uncertain terms, that we have to be supporting them. The Democrats, are telling
Hmm.
us that Trump is out there, and fear of Trump the fascist, is what that should be our overarching principle. We need to vote against what we hate and fear the most, instead of who we are and what we're for and what we need. And we're forever being talked out of our power, um, you know, told that, certain politicians own our votes. No, they don't own our
Hmm.
votes. They have to earn our votes. And if you give up your vote, you give up your power. That's all we have. Unless you're a billionaire, we have the power of the people, which is the power of our votes, and the power of our coalition building. They want us to be divided and conquered. Peace community over there, anti-genocide community over there, uh, workers and jobs and housing somewhere else. They want us to be just a
Ethnic
series of
and
groups.
racial silos, right? Whatever
Totally.
will work. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. It's a game of divide and conquer. And it's important for us to know that we not only have the power, we also have a right. We have a right to a democracy in which we are instructing our elected officials, what it is that we need and what it is that they have to do. They're they want to dump on us this inverted, authoritarian structure where it is big money that buys our political system, and then our political system just gives us a choice of red fascism or blue fascism. And let's just be clear that, fascism is here. We don't have to wait for Donald Trump. There's no greater trademark of fascism than genocide. The Democrats are also leading the charge to silence, our right to free speech, our right to protest, our right to political association. We're in a new era of McCarthyism right now, and we need to not drink the Kool-Aid. And the Kool-Aid is just, being dumped on us right now in this effort to push Kamala as if she's going to, meet our needs or stop the genocide or do anything. She's used a few empathetic words. That's not it. That's not going to do it. And in fact, her foreign policy advisor just clarified the other day, because she had met with the uncommitted, and
Yep.
they came away with some uncertainty, like maybe she would be willing to consider a weapons embargo and meet about that. But no, they clarified, absolutely not. No way. They are continuing to give Israel, basically to pass the baton for being the commander in chief. That belongs to Bibi Netanyahu. And the U.S. really has no say in the matter. Israel does what it wants, and it drags the U.S. along by the nose. And we're supposed to be funding it, arming it, defending it diplomatically, and providing intelligence for it. So,
And
we have news for them. We have
it's
news for them. We don't buy it, not one bit. And we are calling the shots here. We demand an America and a world that's for all of us, and don't cave for anything less than that. The power resides with us. We need to assert that power and build that power in this election. Go ahead. You were going to say.
Well, no, I was just going to really underline something that you had mentioned, before I asked you to kind of delve in deeper on the the blue side of the fascism, right? The red side of the fascism is very easy for progressive minded folk to read. But before, I wanted you to talk a little bit about the kind of approach that's currently being taken by what I've heard you call the anti-democratic party. I just wanted to underline how disingenuous it is to say that you are operating towards a ceasefire at the same time that you release $3.5 billion, worth of arms. And I saw someone liken this. They said that, would you believe a firefighter that was said that they were working to put out a forest fire and dumped 3.5 billion tons of gasoline on a forest?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. How in the world can you pretend that you are moving towards some kind of a ceasefire when you just keep throwing weapons into the mix and requiring nothing from Israel? Netanyahu has given a blank check. It's Iran. It is Hezbollah. It's it's the Houthis, and Yemen, who are told, don't escalate, don't you dare escalate. Meanwhile, we give Israel all the tools to go ahead and escalate. And when they commit outright acts of war, outright acts of aggression, both, the political assassinations, as well as assaulting the embassy of Iran in Syria, which is what they did back in April, these are acts of war. And what happens to
Without
Israel?
question.
Absolutely nothing. Israel pays no price. They don't even get their hands slapped. So forget this. Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
So
Absolutely not.
let me ask a follow-up question then to push, specifically on this. And this is maybe more of an intellectual concern. It's less about a platform, but I'm curious about your read on it. Um, is this the tail wagging the dog? Because I see a lot of people, kind of always reducing this to AIPAC and to the Zionist lobby and to the power of Israel. But my own personal reading is that U.S. imperialism is always doing the driving because we are the ones that are supplying the weapons. So I'm sort of curious as to how you read this moment.
I read this as both,
Okay.
all of the above. And in fact, the ability of AIPAC and the war contractors to buy policy, and they buy policy continuously, that is an expression of the power of the military industrial complex, which we are, we are bought and paid for, and it's not only in the areas of foreign policy, it's also housing, it's
Mm,
also healthcare, it's also education. So this is why we don't fix this around the margins. We don't, we don't. Uh, Gaza and genocide is a microcosm of empire, as Ronald Reagan, Secretary of Defense, said back in the 1980s. This was Caspar Weinberger, who said Israel is the unsinkable battleship for the U.S. in the Middle East. That is what it is. Thank you for telling it like it is. So even if we have a ceasefire, how do you maintain a ceasefire when you still have apartheid, you still have ethnic cleansing, you still have occupation? It's not going to last. Yeah, I mean, we need to save lives. We need to do everything we can. And in my view, by asserting our power, by getting on the ballot, by showing them that we are organized and we are coming for them, that is how we assert power. That is how we push to end the genocide and push for a ceasefire right now, by asserting our power, not by bowing down, not by surrendering to the lesser evil. We have two greater evils. Our job is to stand up and fight for the greater good, and forget the rest. It's just propaganda intended to disempower you, make you hopeless, make you feel powerless, and that resistance is futile. That's exactly their goal. And this is all about asserting our power. It's
okay.
not only that we have the positions and the solutions that the American people and the world are absolutely hungry for, but it's also that we have the numbers that we need to actually take control here. And in this election, this is the last thing I'll say here, there are going to be three pro-war, pro-genocide candidates between RFK, Trump, and Harris. And they could very well be splitting the pro-genocide vote three ways. We will be the unifying pro-worker, anti-war, anti-genocide, climate emergency, anti-student debt, healthcare as a human right, um, uh, uh, national rent control, etc. We are going to roll all that into one and get a lot of numbers here. The question is whether we get to the microphone, and we will determine whether we get to. We are the microphone. We are the microphone. We use social media. We get the word out. We continue to push for ballot access, which is still a fight that's going on right now. Our hope is to be on for at least 90% of voters, so that the um, the the mainstream media machine cannot lock us out, which is their only defense. They're trying to smear me and our campaign, as they usually do. There's nothing new. These are all old, worn smear, fear attacks. I don't think they're going to get anywhere with that. But it's mainly keeping us away from the microphone. And we are going to push. We're going to fight like hell to be heard, because 1 out of every 3 voters did not vote in 2020. 1 out of 3. That is enough to win a three-way race.
Okay.
Right then and there.
So
So
this
this is
is
about
this
getting
is
the word out.
crucial, and you've put the the kind of calculus of power into the conversation. So I want to ask, two kind of questions to push you on this. The first is that I heard in another interview that you did, you referenced the emergence of a leftist coalition in France as a kind of innovative strategy, alliance building in order to fight back the right. I would add to that the electoral coalition that was built in Senegal to get rid of a
Hmm.
despotic, imperialist tool leader that had locked up the opposition leader Ousmane Sonko, and he simply nominated one of his colleagues to run on his ticket, and then when he won, he was named prime minister. So they figured out a way to beat back the fascists. There's all kinds of creative ways to think about
Yeah.
this, but this requires alliance building on the left. And one of the questions that everybody has asked me to ask you is what happened with Cornel West? What happened with the possibility for building an alliance across the progressive and radical left? And I saw you mention that you hope to have a conference, to sort of discuss how we might combine forces. I'm very open to hosting that here at my research center at UCSB if that's something that you want to
Yes,
do. But
absolutely.
I want to hear your answers to this question.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think we bring all players to the table, and I'm not the only one pushing this as well. There's a big call right now for a united front to fight fascism. That is what we need. And, the French model is not hard to adapt immediately. The French model means we get together with other progressive groups, and whoever is leading in that particular campaign, the rest of us bow out and support that. This is also how Allende won in Chile. Allende basically ran with the support of, I want to say Garcia Lorca, although I'm not sure if that's who it is, but I forget. It was a poet, communist poet, who basically said, I'm bowing out here because I want us to have a unified front. And that is how Allende won in Chile. And, so this is not rocket science. This is a simple thing. And I have been pushing this with everybody that I possibly can. We're not finding a lot of takers right now. Most people are saying after the election. In my view, we shouldn't wait till after the election. I think we need to do this now. I think we need the power of
I
collaboration like right
no,
now.
I don't disagree, but you haven't answered the question that I led with, which is, how do you mend what happened and how do you mend that, right? Because I mean, I heard a wonderful interview by Jamal Baraka where he went into, sort of how he read the situation. I have my own view. I'm not asking, from a place of, sort of casting blame. I want to hear your version of the story, and also how do we then remedy that in order to actually kind of build the power that we need given where we find ourselves now.
Yeah, you know, it's hard for me to speak for Dr. West. I can't
Sure.
speak for him.
And
All I can say is,
I don't expect
you
you to.
know, I have extended, every offer I possibly can to collaborate, and he's not been interested in that at all. And I hope that we can overcome that. And I have
Okay.
reached out in many ways and am not getting a response. Let me also say, to his benefit,
Yes.
that it is very hard to build coalitions in the heat of the fire. And if you haven't worked with a political party before, it's very hard, and the only warning I had that it wasn't working out was that he didn't like all the debates that he was going to be required. And I said, well, you know what, that's negotiable. We can reduce the number of debates. That's the only complaint I heard.
Got you.
Um, yeah. So I can see where it's very hard for someone who's been a solo voice and who has not had to kind of do the work of a political party, which is its own animal. It's its own animal to build political parties. It's not easy to do, especially when you're running a campaign. So there's all kinds of room for hurt feelings and
Sure.
misunderstandings, and whatever happened, I don't know. I actually don't know. And I'm hoping that we can all be adults and keep our eyes on the prize and get past it.
So I'm gonna push you on this one last time, and then go to the other question. And this is, sort of I'm a historian, not a journalist, but I'm going to do my best to imitate a journalist by asking tough questions. So I heard you say when you talked about coalition building that one approach would be for each party to on the far left progressive radical spectrum to throw their weight behind whichever party is dominant in a particular district, in a particular state, in a particular. Is that something that you're willing to do, to have the Greens sit back and provide support to another party if it is going to weaken the fascist cause in that particular district, in that particular state? Because this is like putting your money where your mouth
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think you have to be willing to do that. Now, it's easy for me to say because the Greens are kind of the elephant in the room here on ballot access. And so if you're going to try to actually influence an election, you need to go for maximum ballot access.
Sure.
And we have that hands down. So, it's easy for me to say we should do this, that we should collaborate behind the candidate who can fight the biggest fight, who can mount the biggest challenge to empire. And I'm having trouble persuading others that we need to do it. So, it may not work out. Well, it's not going to work out in this election because we're not having other takers. However, let me um, let me defer on a full answer because there may be something coming up very soon, which I'm not able to talk
Sure.
about just yet, that I'm very hopeful is going to be extremely unifying in this election. So I'd say stay tuned for about another 2 weeks, and you will see a potential strategy for unifying a lot of diverse movements here in this presidential
Uh,
election.
Amen. Keep me posted. We
Great.
will be, we will be moving. We will be praying. We will be doing everything that we can. I guess this also takes us into another, kind of strategic or tactical question. I heard you say in another recent interview that you can win the issue without winning the race, right? So I want to hear you expand because a lot of people that are hesitant to vote third party, whether it's Green or Claudia and Karina, Cornell and Melina, whatever it may be, it's because they feel like they're quote unquote wasting their vote. Now, I think, of course, that's ridiculous. Wasting your vote is giving it away to people without asking anything in return for it, and for them to take you for granted. If we want to bring Malcolm into the conversation, he said, if you keep throwing your weight behind candidates without getting anything from them, you are a political chump. That's what Malcolm said. And that's what I believe, most people are when it comes to the Democratic Party, political chumps. But I want to hear you kind of sketch out the damage that can be done even if you don't win an election by a strong showing, by consolidating as much support as possible.
Sure. And just to talk about genocide, if we're on the ballot in just about every state, and then we're getting 5 or 10 or even 15% of the vote, or maybe even more than that, if we are bringing, because we are the only anti-genocide, anti-war, pro-worker climate emergency campaign on the ballot with a pathway to the White House. We're the only one. We're already on the ballot for more than a majority. It's about 70% of voters at this point, and we hope to be up to 90 to 95% of voters by the time that we're done. So we could come out with a really strong vote. 1 out of every 3 voters did not vote in 2020 because they did not support the candidates being rammed down their throat. So if we get another choice out there for people, which is anti-genocide, which is anti-war, which creates healthcare as a human right, which implements rent control, builds a lot of affordable public housing in the public domain, we fight the climate battle, we really create a Green New Deal and create millions of jobs, etc. We put a lot of energy behind that. And if people actually stand up, we're going to cancel student debt, make public higher education free. If the number, that's like 44 million people right there. Canceling medical debt, that's 100 million. If the number of people who would benefit from this hear about it and cast a vote because they got nothing to lose, they're otherwise not voting. We could win this hands down. In a 4-way race, you only need to get 26% of the vote potentially in order to win that race. So we could have a huge impact. But even barring winning the race, by getting to 5-10% even, we show that we're here. We're here, we're getting organized, and we are coming for you, empire and oligarchy. And that gives us a leg to stand on. It gives us a place to build from. You don't
Yeah.
usually get all the way there,
On the
in one
first,
fell
yeah.
swoop. You
Yeah.
have to build. So this is absolutely how we get to power. And saying that, oh, you're throwing away your vote, that is the propaganda of the oligarchy and the empire. This is how they shut down their opposition, and they're pulling out all the stops right now to shut down their opposition. So whatever they say, do the opposite of.
Yeah, I mean, the of course, the issue, and I agree with you that there's a large mass of Americans that are disaffected with the current political system. The problem in reaching them goes back to, sort of a question that we glossed over, which is that they control the media networks, right? So people are just not in a space where they are getting information, about what their government is actually doing and what their government's actually capable of doing that it's not doing. So that's something, that regardless of the circumstances is we're going to bump up against. I guess the question that I would then ask, I want to actually save the questions for like the anti-Zionism, where we go past ceasefire, arms embargo, how we dismantle the apartheid state for the very end, because I think that a lot of the people that are tuning in are connected on those issues. I want you to tell me, in all seriousness, what is how is the Green Party going to like make a difference in the lives of African Americans that are affected by a brutal carceral state, which of course I see embodied in Kamala Harris, right? That's not, I'm not, blind. But what is the actual Green Party platform and program for Black America? Do you support reparations? What kinds of, efforts should we be counting on? And how do we hold you accountable? How do we hold the Green Party accountable? Because I'll be honest, like my best friend voted Green from, Ralph Nader from the first time we both voted. I was foolish enough to vote for Clinton when I turned 18, and he did not. So I've known about, the Green Party for decades, but in my community, for the most part, I think a lot of Black folks just think that the green is for environmentalism and that doesn't have anything to do with us. So tell me why, like, what Kamala doesn't have a program for Black folks. What is the Green Party's program?
Well, it starts with reparations, which is a key foundation of our proposals, and we consider this a debt. This is a debt that's owed, and it is a, roughly 10 to 13 trillion dollar debt, and we are talking about cash payments to repay that debt, which is long overdue. And this is a debt basically for the economy that was built, and for payments that were never made, and for the loss of life and freedom and limb and all that for for generations, which is ongoing. This is about an ongoing debt as Black people continue to be locked out on housing, on education, on healthcare, you name it, across the board. So this is about returning support, financial support to the community that has been denied. And yeah, like the slavery was declared over, but then it rolled into Jim Crow, into lynching, into redlining, into mass incarceration, into the school to prison pipeline, and so on. So this is a way of acknowledging a continuing debt that needs to be repaid, and policies that need to be changed. So then we have a whole slew of policies, including an end to mass incarceration, to an end to the war on drugs, which is very much a war on Black people. It includes amnesty and liberation for those who've been locked up. Hundreds of thousands of people who have been locked up for nonviolent possession and use. So it
So
needs.
let me push just on that particular point. How do you that I mean, there's only so much that can be done at the federal level if you're conceiving of this as a kind of electoral project. How do you sort of how do you extend the reach of that kind of vision?
Yeah, so, for one thing, you're changing the laws at the federal level, which then makes it very hard for states to maintain drugs as illegal when they're not listed as illegal. And
Gotcha.
we undertake yeah, so this isn't just laws, this is like the whole DEA and how the DEA works and how substances are listed as, dangerous, illegal, etc. Instead, we approach, so immediately we legalize cannabis, and we begin legalizing a whole slew of other psychedelic substances, which means, that instead of treating substance use as a criminal problem, this is a public health issue. And we make
You're decriminalizing the user, and you're disempowering the drug dealer. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And we are offering support for people who are dependent, to support them with full treatment, with so-called, harm reduction, which means there are many ways to approach this problem. And you cannot treat substance dependence in isolation. You have to treat it along with housing and healthcare, which is wraparound, and with jobs and job training. So this is about a holistic approach to this issue of the drug crisis, and to use models like in Europe where it is successful. Treatment has not, and Ducrim has not been successful in this country because it's isolated. It does not provide a whole set of wraparound services that people need if they are going to, end dependency.
Thank you for that. I want to push on one particular piece of it because I've heard in other contexts, you've made a connection between approaching, America's, debilitating drug problem as a public health problem rather than a criminal, quote unquote, criminal justice, really carceral state problem, right?
Yeah.
And you tethered that to an approach to immigration reform and how you see your border policy as distinct from that of the purple fascists. We'll just put the colors together and call it blue and red. They'll be the purple fascists. So go ahead. Can
Yeah.
you
Yes.
can you make that connection for me? I heard it, but I want to hear you flesh it out.
Sure. So the war on drugs is part of what creates the migration crisis, And so let me just address the migration crisis for a
Please.
moment to say the most important thing we can do about the migration crisis is to stop causing it in the first place through drug policies that empower the drug cartels and create the violence that surrounds them. The minute you have legalization, the power of the drug cartels goes away. They rely on the black market. They rely on being the sole supplier. So, you pull the rug out from under the violence of the drug cartels through legalization, both in this country and, it's been the U.S. pushing the drug wars south of the border as well.
Yeah.
So we kind of, we bring an end to that. But that's not the only thing driving migration. It's violence, it's regime change, it's corporate domination and exploitation. You can look at, for example, Guatemala, where the U.S. created a regime change operation back in the 1950s, I think, on behalf of United Fruit that did not want land redistributed to peasants there by the democratically elected government, Arbenz, I think it was at the time. So we just created regime change, and we
Sure.
installed dictators. Same thing we did in Iran.
Hey, listen,
Right.
name a failed state anywhere on the planet,
Yeah,
and then tell me that there was not either a CIA assassination
exactly.
or a U.S. military intervention.
And if
I'll wait.
I can, yes, if I can
Please,
give
yeah,
you
go ahead.
one really compelling example that I
Sure.
only learned about, Costa Rica had a revolution back in the 1950s, just before the CIA was formed. So they kind of made it in under the wire. They got rid of their military. They put their money into land reform and, and healthcare and, serving the population instead of the military. So Costa Rica has remained kind of this island of, it's not perfect, but it's, compared to what surrounds it in most of
Sure.
Latin America, it is an island of incredible, tranquility and happiness. If you go there, I mean, you don't see people out on the street.
Yeah.
You don't see homeless, it's kind of like shocking. This little poor country of Costa Rica has a pretty decent, wonderful place. And then right after that, Guatemala got hit, when they tried to do the same thing because we had a CIA at that point, so that just tells
Just
you. At any rate,
just wait till they find natural gas under Costa Rica. We'll try to fix that, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's the
yeah, exactly. I know.
yeah.
Yes, this is why we need kind of international coalitions here that are defending countries that don't have a military, because they don't. So at any rate, on
Yeah.
the issue of migration,
Please.
it's regime change, it's war. Look at Haiti, and the incredible crisis that envelops Haiti and the refugees that are streaming out of Haiti. We conducted 2 regime change operations against Aristide, who was the democratically elected socialist, um, president of Haiti, and we took him down twice so that Hillary Clinton could then go
Yes, we
back
did.
in and reverse their minimum wage, which was increased by referendum up to 60 cents an hour. Can you imagine? Hillary Clinton drove it back down to 30 cents an hour. Once we got Aristide out of the way, we drove their minimum wage down again so that U.S. Clothing manufacturers could maximize their profits. This
Listen,
is,
don't even get me started on Hillary, and Obama. I mean, there's an actual African slave trade now in Libya because of the assassination of Gaddafi, right? Like all we do is destabilize wherever we can.
yeah.
Ugh, the Clintons. I am not with her. Let's just make the shirt. And Kamala for me is really, to be perfectly honest, call her Kamala Clinton, call her Hillary Brown, call her whatever you want. She is just Hillary 2.0, as
Exactly.
far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
So
Yes.
can I then ask, so is there anything else you want to kind of flesh out that I didn't give you room for on immigration policy
Yeah, let me
before I ask the next one?
complete that to say that stabilizing the climate and assisting, countries of the global south in adapting to climate and getting our own climate emissions under control is absolutely critical because we're not doing that. And the Inflation Reduction, what is it called? The Inflation Reduction Act is not a climate bill. It's a fossil fuels first bill. It actually mandates the sell-off of 60 million acres offshore every year, as well as 2 million acres onshore, before there can be any major renewable projects built. So it's a hoax. We need to get our climate emissions under control, and for the rest of the world as well. That will, because there's loads of farmers who are having to migrate because they're being put out of business especially by drought. So we can massively decompress the migration problem, and some of this has a very short timeline. Some of it's going to take a while, but the drug wars are a very active, driver of the migration crisis, and we can fix that practically
We can
overnight.
fix that. I mean, yeah, it's a demand side question in large part. To be perfectly honest, as a historian of imperialism, the way that you see extractive destabilization
Yeah,
function in Central America now or in the Congo right now is actually functionally no different than the way that the slave trade functioned in the 16th century, 17th century. You literally destabilize the shepherds in the
yeah,
society, and that sets loose the wolves. And then that allows you to extract whatever it is that you want from that region at low cost because you
yeah.
have no actual political leadership that's present. And that
That's
means
right.
that you get coltan and cobalt and copper cheap now out of the Congo, and it meant that you got my ancestors cheap out of the Congo,
Yes.
300 years ago.
Yes.
So it's the same game. It has not changed. And I will say, it's important to connect, the problem of immigration with, this political destabilization. I want one other piece from you on the immigration question.
And there's one
Um,
other piece
yeah,
that I
please
have to inject as
go
well,
ahead.
which is that
Then please.
decompressing the drivers is really critical, but we also have to deal with people who are coming, they're coming and their problems persist, regardless. And so people have to be respected. These are mainly people who are seeking asylum from policies that we have inflicted on them and violence that we have created in their lives. So we need to respect their rights to asylum, treat them with dignity, and instead of investing billions upon billions in a wall that does no good, that basically kills people, kills wildlife, destabilizes the environment. The wall is a disaster, and it also does not keep drugs out because drugs are coming in through portals of entry, mainly through Americans. Americans are bringing in drugs. It's not immigrants that bring in drugs. And immigrants also do not bring violence. They actually make the country safer because they bring a lot of law-abiding, community-oriented, hardworking people here. And we know that their crime rate is actually way lower than that of, plain old
How
USA. So all
how
this stuff is
shocking
nonsense.
that people that come from other countries are less violent than Americans. Amazing. Uh,
It is. And the last piece I want to say is that instead of putting the money into the wall, we put the money into basically civil infrastructure so that we have the migration attorneys and we are doing background checks as people come and getting them papers right away. Because when migrants can work, they much more than pay their own way. So this is not a burden to any community. This is actually huge economic development. This is a resource as people who are ready to go to work and are good, upstanding citizens as they come over the border, they get their papers, they get their background checks, and voila, this problem is entirely self-created, by the U.S. migration, institutions. Not a
Got you.
problem at
So,
all.
yeah, and you actually ended up answering the question that I had, which is about the kind of discourse of criminalization that is associated, with the so-called migrant, crisis. So thank you for filling that piece in. So then, I just to kind of reset us. There are two pieces as I see it, as somebody that's, like been at the UCSB encampment that I organized a Palestinian liberation concert on UCSB campus on October 21st. uh, to, and the Zionists immediately came for my job. I'm a tenured professor and I managed to survive that run. Who knows if I'll survive this one? But what I've observed, in sort of being connected to activist spaces, movement spaces, is that there's a sort of dual response to the perversity of this genocide. The first part about it is the apartheid state, the occupation, the genocide, the fact that we are essentially being asked to fund contemporary Nazis, right? And to host them at our Congress. But the other part of it is how much this costs in terms of opportunity costs, right? The idea that writing these massive checks to, Raytheon, and to Boeing, and laundering them through Israel is money that we could be using for social programming and so a social platform here. So tell me what that social platform looks like in your vision, and then how we execute it.
Okay, great. And let me just put some numbers on it because it's
By all
half of our
means.
congressional budget. It's half of our congressional budget. It's $1 trillion a year, effectively. And even that doesn't include like the militarization, here at home, which is another part of, a militarized foreign policy bleeds over into, militarization here at home too. But it's about $1 trillion a year, which is half of the discretionary congressional budget. So this is dollars that we should be putting into true security here at home. So, we call for an economic bill of rights, and that means a right to health care for everyone as a human right, head to toe, cradle to grave, under a Medicare for all system, which is way more efficient. It cuts out all the bureaucracy and the red tape, which currently consumes
How do
one out
you
of every three.
how do you beat back the insurance companies if that's your move? If I can ask.
Okay, so yes, and that question applies to all of our agenda that's not subject to just executive
Right,
authority. And there's a fair amount we can do under executive authority, but I don't think we can do healthcare under executive authority.
right,
Possibly by declaring an emergency, but I don't know, that would be dicey. On the other hand, this is something that the American people support, especially if they hear about it. They really support it. So two things we're going to bring back to basically re-engage the wheels of democracy. One is town hall meetings. Force elected officials to actually meet with their constituents. They don't do that anymore. They used to do that. They used to have to face the music and face their voters. Now they just talk to their donors. So we need, we can use the bully pulpit of the White House to actually shame elected officials into attending their town hall meetings. And perhaps we have a whole system for assisting communities in undertaking recall elections when their elected officials do not engage their communities. So that's one part of it. Another part of it is congressional hearings. This is something that we used to do in a way that was meaningful, like the hearings of the Church Commission and so on. That doesn't happen anymore. It's the hearings are mostly political posturing. So through congressional hearings, you educate the public, you educate the press, and you can actually build support for specific objectives. And in our view, the president is not simply a commander-in-chief. The president has to be an organizer-in-chief, so that we're putting specific goals on the table. And the first one would be Medicare for all, because there's so much support for it, there's so much need for it, and it saves us $500 billion a year. This is another way that we help pay for the other things that we need, like improving the quality of our schools and making higher education free and all that. So there's a lot that we can do simply by engaging the wheels of democracy and then forcing elected officials to respond to their constituents. There has never been, excuse me, an occupant of the White House with that kind of strategy.
right.
Barack Obama had a big grassroots movement that helped him break barriers. But as soon as he was elected, he put them on the shelf and he said, okay, you guys can go
Okay.
home now. This is really
So
for us.
let me, sorry, you raised it, so I have to vent, just briefly. He had them broken. He had the Democratic Party machinery exactly where he wanted them,
Mm-hmm.
and then he handed them the
Oh,
keys.
yeah.
He was able to get himself elected
Yeah.
without any of their, well, with just a small portion of their kind of traditional institutional structures, and he handed everything back, and became a brown skinned imperialist. He fooled me. I'm not gonna lie. In 2008, I got fooled. Not in 2012. And don't even get me started on how Kamala is nowhere near the
Mm-hmm.
candidate that Obama was.
Mm-hmm.
But continue.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Sorry.
Yes. No, I agree completely.
this is
So,
this is like a
yeah.
very, very sore spot for me. So yeah.
I think for
Uh,
a lot of people, and we need to be mindful of that right now, because that is exactly what is happening right now. There is such a PR spin being put on Kamala Walls right now, on both of them. And, she is not doing interviews. She is not doing press conferences. The wagons are being circled around her. She's just a blank slate. And when she's been forced, she has clarified that no, actually, she is not going to use a weapons embargo on Israel. She's not even going to meet and talk about it. That was like, a false lead to the uncommitted community to think that she was going to do that. So they then clarified, no, she's not doing that. She's also not supporting a ban on fracking. So all we've heard about is a little bit of what she's not doing, and otherwise she's just pretending
there,
to be
there
doing stuff.
There's no policy platform on her website. It is
There's
7
not.
donation buttons and pictures. That's what it is.
And it's gear. It's like buy my gear and be a walking advertisement for me. That speaks volumes about who she is and what she's about. It's like, don't be fooled. Don't walk into this trap. This is a trap. Don't go for it. We have to stand up and fight for what it is that we need, because it's not getting better without us. And it's actually, we're being thrown under the bus in a huge way. But, in
Absolutely,
terms
and
of,
I apologize for sidetracking, because it is so easy to get into the tearing down mode on these particular questions but you were in building mode first on healthcare. I want to also hear about housing. I want to hear
Yes.
about, sort
Yeah.
of what
Yeah.
the constructive vision is.
Great. And by the way, under healthcare, pharmaceuticals are included in that. Right now, 8 million people were driven into poverty last year by the cost of their healthcare. 18 million cannot afford their pharmaceuticals. This is outrageous because the pharmaceutical pricing is absolutely sky high. 10 and more times what it should be. So this is outrageous. We can fix this problem and save $500 billion at the same time. Why are we not doing it? Because we have criminals in elected office right now. Another thing we will do on day one is undertake an antitrust lawsuit against mainstream media to break up the corporate consolidated media so we can actually hear the truth and hear a diversity of viewpoints and all that instead of just packaging things for big corporate America. And that too is a day one thing that we can do even without the approval of Congress and all that. Let me talk about housing
Sure.
because this is a huge crisis. 50% of everyone who rents is paying 30 to 50% of their income, which means you don't have money to pay for your car insurance or your health care or your student debt or anything else. So, this is a state of emergency. Half of renters really are 1 to 2 paychecks away from being evicted, and then evictions are sky high, and homelessness is absolutely at record rates, and now they're going after the unhoused community and evicting them and taking the few possessions that they have. This is absolutely outrageous, and this is being driven by a Democratic governor in California
In
right
California,
now.
sure.
Leading,
Gavin Newsom is doing it, and let's not forget that it was Dems that were sending fascist cops to crack kids' heads open on campuses for peacefully protesting. Yeah,
yes,
that's that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
uh,
We can come back to that, and we should come back to that. But just to finish on housing here for a
please.
second, because this is a crisis, but it's a very fixable crisis. Public housing was outlawed basically under Clinton with this so-called Fair Cloth legislation that said that we cannot invest in public housing, which is outrageous because it means then that housing is purely the province of profit. It's being totally commodified, and it should not. We should have a right to affordable housing. And,
Sure.
part of the Green New Deal basically includes and I'll come to that in a minute, but it does include taking into public management and public ownership and public planning, critical divisions of society, and that includes housing. So we need to be building public housing again, which we can do affordably. We can't do it affordably right now because so-called affordable housing is usually just a tiny package of incentives, huge incentives which are handed to developers to build their very expensive housing and make profits. So we should not be in the business of subsidizing developer profits, which is what we're doing right now. We need so-called social housing, which is housing which is planned to be sustainable, to have public transit, so it's not contributing to congestion, and it's environmentally sound, low impact, renewably powered. We can also implement, with the stroke of a pen, rent control across the country. We need that. We need to end this gentrification, throwing people out so that you can remodel the housing and charge, sky high rates. So rent control can get the whole thing under control. We need to outlaw the buy up of housing by private equity and corporations, which are holding onto the housing supply, converting housing to rental so that they can just get rich
They're
renting this out and
they're
driving costs.
what they're engaged in doing is actually they're trying to turn the entire United States of America into a company store, right? Where
Yeah,
you go from no, right? You go from the company owned, house, and then you go to your job, which is also owned by the company, and then you go spend in the store, which is owned by the company, and you run up debt so that you never ever get out of the circle. From the cradle to the grave, the corporation owns you. So then, can I ask now a kind of tactical question again about this? Because I study revolutionary movements. That's what I write about. And I write about ones that are successful and I write about ones that are unsuccessful.
Mhm.
And one of my reads of this particular moment is that I have yet to hear from any third party candidate a vision for movement building politically below the level of campaigning for president, right? We can make the argument about how you win the issue without winning the race, but a lot of the damage that has been done to what has passed for American democracy, and I'm not a big believer in in that, in a lot of different ways, but there have been, pieces of it, at least since the 65 Voting Rights Act. A lot of the damage that has been done to it in the last 30 years has been done at the level of courts. It's been at the level of state government. It's been not at the level of kind of the national presidential campaigns, but of the broader political party work of both the teams red and teams blue. And so, how does the Green Party have a vision for how to work at this level, because that's the kind of structure that actually holds together a successful political movement in the long run?
Yes, of course. And in fact, this is where the Green Party has had most of its impact and puts most of its energy. We've actually elected well over 1,000 elected officials at the local level, that is, city councilors, boards of selectmen, mayors, school committee, planning boards, library boards, land regulation boards, et cetera. So this is actually where the Greens have most experience. And, this is also where we tend to get reelected in high numbers as well. And the fact that you haven't heard about it is part of the media blackout on what we do as Greens and the effort to really smear us as a political, you know, um, naive force that comes out every 4 years and shoots for presidency. No, it's not that at all. Not at all. We are fundamentally about, the global is local, and that's where you have to start, and that's where you have to build from. But we face the same obstacles, at the local level: lack of coverage by the press, the effort, it's like what the Democratic Party mobilized against Bernie Sanders to basically rip the election out from under him. Uh, that's what they do to us all the time. They throw us off the ballot. They infiltrate us. Recently, the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, was caught red-handed advertising for people to manage infiltrators and spies in order to undermine our ballot access drives and our other campaigns. It's just like shocking. They've also tied up our public funding. We should have
Oh no,
hundreds of thousands of
that,
dollars
that's
right
that's
now.
that's not shocking. That's how foxes move, right? That's
Yeah,
what we were,
totally.
taught. It's slime backs. I mean, just
Right.
I do want to set the record straight. I told you my best friend has voted Green. I didn't tell you that his mother was a Green Party candidate and she was on city council in Minneapolis. So
Oh,
I know
oh, cool.
that was my hanging curveball for you
Oh,
to hit out of the
interesting.
park. So that was me, teeing one up for you, because
Oh,
I do
oh,
know
cool.
that
Yeah,
the Green Party has done much of its work at the grassroots.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think, well, one, I want to be respectful of your time, and I'm looking at the questions that folks have sent in, so far. Um, I have a kind of closing set of questions that bring us back to how we end the bloodshed and the slaughter in Gaza, irrespective of electoral campaigning, irrespective of winning or losing. This is
Hmm.
not a political issue. This is a moral issue and a human issue. So speaking not as, Dr. Jill Stein, presidential candidate for the Green Party, but as Dr. Jill Stein, human being, presumably with a functioning heart. How do you understand this, kind of current moment of, Zionist atrocity, and how do we work our way out of it? I understand that the party has a vision for it and you have an electoral platform behind it, but I need to hear from you as a human being on this question.
So let me say that, this is the moral imperative of our moment. It's not the only genocide. There are other genocides going on, but this is the one that we are paying for. This is the one that we are enabling every day. This is the one that our elected officials make possible, that they are conducting. This doesn't happen without us. So we are against our will, we are enabling this genocide. We can shut this genocide down. And that's absolutely a moral imperative. For me personally, as a Jew growing up after the Holocaust, I made my peace as a kid, in a community trying to make its peace with genocide. And for us, making peace with that was about resolving that it will never happen again, and that we must hold accountable not only those who conduct genocide, but those who are bystanders to genocide. And I grew up just thinking that you don't be a bystander to genocide. It's not okay. You can't do that. So it tears at the fabric of my making peace with the world as a 5-year-old, as I was like hearing about this and seeing everybody was all in a tizzy about it. I understood it's you have to fight. You have to fight this incredible, greatest crime against humanity. You have to fight it. You have to find lesser forms of it too. You're not a bystander to this stuff. And we're all accountable. So that means it's not okay even for people who've been previously genocided to conduct genocide. No, you can't do that.
You don't, you mean you don't get genocide passes if you've been genocided? Because, I mean, I feel like Black folks would have had, some claims on this. I've got 2 indigenous great grandmothers. I feel like we would have had claims on this as indigenous folk as well, but we didn't get the memo. It's almost as though Zionism has something to do with white supremacy, just throwing that out there.
Yeah. Yeah, I should say so. And, in my view, being an anti-Zionist has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. And to say that they are one and the same, it's like saying that it's anti-Semitic to oppose genocide. And anyone who says that it's anti-Semitic to oppose genocide is making the most anti-Semitic statement that they can possibly make. So yeah, I mean, this is something that I personally am compelled to do. I can't tune it out. I'm sorry. I can't pretend it's not happening. So I did not have a choice about standing up to fight this in the biggest way that I possibly could. And I think it's really critical to do that. It's really simple to shut this down. How do we shut it down?
Talk to me.
By what's that? By
I said,
demanding
talk to me, yeah.
democracy. By demanding democracy is how we shut it down. If democracy prevails here, it's over. It's absolutely over because the American people oppose this in huge numbers. So this is all about asserting our values as voters. The problem is not that we support genocide. The problem is that our electeds support genocide, that our corporate sponsored political parties who are bought and paid for by Wall Street and the war machine, that's who supports genocide. So by standing up to throw the bums out who support genocide, we are throwing out the bums who also support, predatory health care and predatory housing and, and the climate crisis. These are people who have basically sold out our essential democratic rights, our right to justice, our right to peace. It's all gone out the window because they have sold out for their political careers and they get funding through a very corrupt system. So it's not rocket science about how to fix this in the particular and in the general. At the end of the day, I really buy 2 things. Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. Don't be shy of that demand. Do not drink the Kool-Aid. This is not about sucking up to power and supporting the so-called lesser evil. Forget the lesser evil. We have 2 greater evils. We are about the greater good. We have to fight for the greater good like our lives depend on it, because in fact they do. We're all going down with the tubes here. It's not only that empire and genocide is leading us to the verge of nuclear war. Militarism, blind militarism is taking us to nuclear war right now in 3 places around the world. And There's no surviving that.
Quick question. So, and this is just occurring to me now because I've heard you talk about Ukraine. What do you do with NATO?
Um, let Europe uh, decide
Let
its own
Europe worry about
defense.
Europe?
Let Europe be its own defense instead of the U.S. telling Europe how to defend us. That doesn't help Europe. Europe came out of the Second World War with this OSCE, I think it's called, the Office of Security and Cooperative Economic,
Yep.
whatever, an architecture for collaboration, which is not fundamentally military. It's nuts to have an alliance which is fundamentally military. It militarizes all these problems, which is nuts. And by the way, NATO, why do we need NATO? We need NATO because it's an excellent marketing tool for the war profiteers. That's
Of
what it
course.
is. If you sign up
Of
on
course.
NATO, you got to spend 3% of your GDP on US weapons, is what it is about. So that's the only
It's
reason for
look,
NATO.
it
Forget
is
NATO.
it is all one direct cash transfer from from the pockets of American taxpayers, laundered through foreign
Yes.
wars and handed directly to arms manufacturers, without any question.
Exactly.
Um,
And the world is going down the tubes, for it. So we don't need NATO. NATO is also a way for U.S. to legitimize its foreign policy without international law and the UN.
mm,
We need to do some
yeah,
fixes in the
that's a good
UN
point.
so the U.S. doesn't have its kind of stranglehold on the Security Council. But we have to work with the UN and with the body of international law and human rights. That is how we need to move forward. Right now, the U.S. creates its own kind of legitimacy. Oh, NATO supports this. So no, that's not how we do stuff. And the U.S. creates its own alternative to international law.
Sure.
Rules-based order. That's what they call it. Rules-based order, which is not written down anywhere. Rules-based order is like what we want when we want it. That's what we want. It's just a way to dismantle international law. So this is
Yeah,
nuts.
and to spit directly in its face, frankly. I mean, it's never, we always just raise our hand, and it's so galling that they always send a black person to do it, right? Um, to raise your hand for the veto vote, so that the genocide can continue.
That's,
I've kept you for a long time. I'm gonna end with the two questions that
oh,
I
wait,
ended
wait.
everyone. Oh,
One
go
thing
ahead. No,
before you
please,
do, just to
please, please.
just to finish, I said that there were two quotes that I think
Yes.
are real guidelines. So one guidance is from Frederick Douglass: "Power concedes nothing without a demand." The other one is
Yep.
from Alice Walker: "The biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. We have the power. We have the numbers. We have the vision. We have the agenda. This is all about getting to the microphone so that people who otherwise aren't going to vote, and that's 1 out of every 3 eligible voters, it's about getting the word out that we, the people, actually have the power, and we have a program that's all about us. This is about standing up and breaking the duopoly, breaking our chains, and demanding an America that works for all of us and a world that works for all of us. This is within our reach if we stand up and demand it. Let's do that. Go to, by the way, before I forget, JillStein2024.com. If you can throw something into the hat, do that, because they are holding on to our $300,000 that we desperately need to finish our ballot access battles. They're dragging
Yeah,
us into court, trying to throw
they're
us off.
they're crooks, and they spend that
They
before
are crooks.
breakfast without even knowing it. The I just wanted to underline your brilliant point with the Alice Walker quote, because it takes us back to Malcolm. Malcolm said, "We are not outnumbered; we are out organized." And
Yes,
he and
that's
and
great.
and one of the people that was most directly inspired by Malcolm, the late great Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, he said that. People mobilize around issues, but revolutionaries organize against systems, and
Yeah,
that not all revolutions are, armed revolutions. You can have political revolutions if you organize against the systems.
exactly.
So
Exactly. And we are in a
that's two
perfect
more from
storm.
Malcolm.
We are in, yeah, I will remember that. Okay. I'm adding that as number 3 to my favorite guidelines here. But
Oh,
we are
you're
in a
freezing
perfect
up on
storm.
me. Hope you're still there.
How about now? Is that working now? Are you seeing me?
Yeah,
Let's
better
see.
now.
I'm
Better now.
seeing
Yeah, I
you
lost you for a moment.
freeze. All right. Okay, great. But basically, this is a perfect storm. So don't let them talk you out of our power. We've got it right now. People are pissed, and the uprising is in full swing. So it needs a political voice as well as its voice in the streets. But
Yep.
the political voice is a part
It's
of this. So
significant.
join.
Yeah, and everybody's got a part to play in the resistance, both inside and outside of structures. It's narrow-minded to think of it any other way. So the last question
Yeah.
is, when I was doing my PhD interviews, man, was it 30 years ago already? um, yeah, 25 plus years ago. The last question that I asked in every interview was always the same. It was two questions. Was there anything that you wanted that you thought I should know that I didn't think to ask? And then that's the first one. And then was there anything that you wanted to ask me before we left?
Oh God, a gazillion things. So I didn't say anything about a Green New Deal, and I'll just mention that in
Yep.
passing that that's something that actually starts on day one also, because by declaring an environmental emergency and a climate emergency, which we have, wildfires, totally out of control, floods, storms, drought, the Colorado River is going down, maybe 1 to 2 years if we're lucky, and it just won't get out of the tank anymore. That means California agriculture also goes down. That means half of the fruits and vegetable supply for the nation is gone. And you think you've seen inflation, just wait. Uh, you know, so the Green New Deal is how we fix this. We do have a climate emergency. And by declaring that emergency, that releases over $500 billion a year to create the jobs that we need in critical areas: energy, housing, transportation, agriculture, for starters. And we need public management and ownership of these systems as well if they're going to get brought online in adequate time. The private sector is not going to do this for us. So just to say, the Green New Deal is here. It's ready for the taking. We can make this happen. And, on day one, we have the money to do it as well. So this is a kind of motherhood and apple pie thing. And just by standing up and pushing for it, we can make this happen. So that's kind of what I wanted to
Yeah,
tell
that's the
you.
one that I didn't get to ask. So what any question for me before we go?
Oh man, yeah. So how did you move? Well, how did you get into an academic career? I'm really interested in that because there aren't very many revolutionaries who have
Yeah,
shared
I had
professorships.
I'll be honest about this. It was Malcolm, the autobiography of Malcolm X at age
Wow.
15,
Wow.
got me interested in Islam and African history and radical
Mhm.
black radicalism. And ultimately, I went on to study African history at an undergraduate level, and I had a very radical professor that suggested that I could consider doing this for a living. And I told her that I was too interested in social change, to spend my time teaching in classrooms. And she persuaded me that there are things that you can do from inside academic institutions that are going to shape generations of minds, that you can write analyses. And then I read works by people like Walter Rodney, who was, an activist and a historian of Africa. I read, analytical works by people like Frantz Fanon, and I became convinced that you could do meaningful intellectual
Mm.
work that would lead to, to progressive, radical, and even revolutionary change. And so, we're still swinging, and I really appreciate you taking the time to engage this conversation, with us. I'm going to follow up with your folks offline because I have a research center here at UCSB.
Cool.
It's the Institute for the Study of Race, Religion, and Revolution, and the funding, is flexible, so we could perhaps help facilitate that, progressive conference that you're
Cool.
suggesting, and try to bring some of this to broader public light and conversation. So I'll reach out to your folks. It's been a good hour and a half getting the chance to hear from you and talk to you. Appreciate you making the time.
Likewise, really appreciate all you do. Love your channel, and keep doing your amazing, Instagram messages and videos. It's really wonderful. So
Yeah.
yeah, all right,
All right,
wonderful. It's
we'll be
been
in
really an
touch.
honor.
All right, take care.
Take
Bless.
care.
Power to the people.
Likewise, power to the people.